Okay, let's jump right in. Today we're unpacking a massive concept, one that's rapidly emerging as the foundational operating system to unlock Africa's next decade of economic growth. We're talking about digital trust infrastructure. Now, if you care about capital allocation, sovereign debt, or foreign direct investment on the continent, you definitely want to pay attention here. We aren't just talking about some shiny new software product today, we are literally talking about the structural architecture of modern economic sovereignty.
So think about this paradox for a second. Africa possesses the youngest demographic profile globally, plus these incredibly rapid mobile adoption rates. You'd think that would automatically translate into explosive, highly scalable economic growth, right? Yet, across the continent, you have trillions of dollars in real estate and enterprise value that remain completely immobilized. They're stuck. They can't be leveraged, they can't be borrowed against, and they can't be efficiently sold.
And that brings us to this concept of dead capital. The crucial thing to understand is that this capital isn't dead because it lacks value. Actually, it's dead because an institutional deficit means there's no secure, interoperable way to prove who actually owns it. Think about a small business owner. If they can't cryptographically prove their identity or the ownership of their storefront, commercial banks simply cannot extend credit to them. The underlying value is absolutely there, but the trusted proof of that value is missing.
To break this all down, here's our roadmap for today. 1. Africa's institutional deficit. 2. The anatomy of digital trust. 3. Upgrading traditional trust systems. 4. The economic multiplier effect. And 5. The implementation horizon. Starting right off with Section 1, Africa's institutional deficit.
Right, so what do we actually mean by an institutional deficit? In many emerging markets, you have these incomplete or siloed analog institutions, which basically force everyday transactions to default to really high-friction interpersonal verification. In advanced economies, trust is essentially a hidden public utility, right? It's maintained by centuries of land registries, corporate registries, judicial consistency. But when those layers are missing or corruptible, everyday commerce hits a massive, massive bottleneck.
And the actual on-the-ground cost of this deficit is staggering. We're talking about a lack of scalable trust infrastructure that directly starves informal markets, leaving business owners unable to even verify their identities to banks. This reliance on manual proof creates a massive economic drag. When governments can't verify property boundaries, municipal taxation fails, and infrastructure financing just stalls out. It also rapidly expands the shadow economy. And keep in mind, folks in informal sectors aren't inherently untrustworthy. They're simply starved of the tools they need to formalize securely.
Okay, moving to Section 2, the anatomy of digital trust.
So what is the fix? Enter Digital Trust Infrastructure, or DTI. Now, I want to be really clear here. DTI is not just software. It's the fundamental architecture of modern economic sovereignty. It shifts trust verification entirely away from analog institutions and over to cryptographic protocols. It replaces fragmented, paper-based trust with cryptographic-grade institutional certainty. This means trust is no longer tied to some physical filing cabinet in a municipal building somewhere. It becomes an instant, borderless utility.
Let's actually look at the 3 pillars of this modular stack. First, you establish a cryptographically secure legal personhood. Then, you link that to tamper-evident institutional registries, like property rights. And finally, you route it all through consent-driven secure exchange rails. This stack is entirely interdependent. Without that foundational identity, downstream fintech is restricted to just the elite populations. But when you link identity to property rights and allow secure data exchange, you effectively eliminate systemic fraud.
Which brings us to Section 3, Upgrading Traditional Trust Systems. When you put traditional trust systems side by side with DTI, the contrast is literally night and day. Think about the elevated cost of capital in a manual system. Traditional paper-based deeds and manual searches leave the door wide open for discretionary bureaucratic approvals and massive title dispute risks. But by shifting to cryptographic digital registries and instant API queries, we actually see a 90% reduction in title dispute risk. 90%! That upgrade fundamentally changes the risk-adjusted returns for an entire market. But how do you scale this safely? That brings us to DPI, Digital Public Infrastructure. To scale DTI, governments must leverage DPI, ensuring no single private monopoly captures the fundamental layers of national commerce. DPI treats foundational digital services as essential public utilities, not commercial fiefdoms. It relies heavily on open-source licenses to prevent vendor lock-in, which generates these incredible positive externalities that benefit the whole society. A great way to visualize this is to think of robust DPI like the physical roads and highways of a digital economy. It fosters interoperability and allows any licensed actor to connect safely. Just as you wouldn't want one single private company owning every physical road or port in a country, you absolutely don't want a monopoly on the digital roads where identity, money, and data travel. By using open standards, you spur private sector innovation and accelerate scalable deployment.
Next up, Section 4, the economic multiplier effect.
So why should macroeconomic capital allocators even care? Well, look at this number. According to global development studies, robust foundational identification systems can unlock between 3 to 6% of a nation's GDP value, simply by reducing administrative friction and corporate fraud. We're talking about completely eliminating ghost workers, duplicate identities, and synthetic fraud in public procurement. That is a massive injection of economic vitality just from upgrading the trust layer.
And you get there through these specific DTI economic multipliers. Implementing this transforms informal economic activity into formal, liquid, and highly bankable enterprise value. For instance, capital velocity absolutely skyrockets when you can instantly verify property rights. You're reducing commercial real estate transaction times from months of manual checks down to just minutes. Plus, by using automated tax compliance, nations can optimize their fiscal situation, close leakages, and bring those informal shadow economies right into the light.
Ultimately, what this does is massively compress the risk premium. And if you're an institutional investor, you are evaluating markets strictly through the lens of risk-adjusted returns. By directly compressing these risk premiums through clear property rights and predictable administrative systems, investors finally gain the confidence they need to allocate long-term foreign direct investment. Transparent, immutable public records act as a literal beacon for cross-border venture and infrastructure capital.
Finally, Section 5, the implementation horizon.
Bringing this all back down to earth, what does executing this transition actually look like over the next decade? Well, it absolutely requires strong public-private partnerships. Governments need to secure the open protocols and the foundational digital identity layers. That then frees up the private sector to do what they do best: innovate on the UI and build fintech applications on top. A really crucial technical upgrade here is transitioning to public key infrastructure, or PKI, for cryptographic electronic signatures. And of course, the entire ecosystem has to adopt privacy by design principles from day one, so trust isn't just assumed, but cryptographically guaranteed.
To wrap things up, you really have to understand that structural reforms in institutional trust yield way higher compounding returns than just throwing direct capital subsidies at a problem. Digital trust infrastructure is the definitive operating system for Africa's next economic leap. The question isn't if this transformation is going to happen, but which investors are going to recognize the shift before the rest of the world catches on. To get ahead of these macro signals and access our premium investor network, subscribe to the Upside Journal. See you in the next Daily Drop.